Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I trust we're all well rested as we begin this first session of the day. We're excited because we have an interesting presentation to begin with. So, distinguished overseas guests and speakers, honorable members, ministers and members of the Cayman Islands Legislative Assembly, chief officers and department heads of government. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to say that Dr. Lloyd Waller is going to be the presenter for this first session. He has just about 25 minutes to speak about the role of ICT in combating corruption. Dr. Waller is the head of government, Department of Government, UWI Mona. He's also the director of the Center for Leadership and Governance at UWI. His research areas are e-governance. Dr. Waller completed his PhD in New Zealand. He has worked with the UN, the World Bank, and the IMF. So he comes to us with a range of experience. Dr. Waller, welcome, and we look forward to your presentation. Please welcome him, ladies and gentlemen.
Sorry. Good? All right, great, thanks. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Okay, that's better. Thanks for having me here today for this presentation. All protocols observed. For the last 5 decades, there have been much research and interest in the problem of corruption. The interest is largely as a result of the recognition that corruption undermines the development project. Corruption significantly affects poverty, healthcare, education, foreign direct investment, socio-political behavior, sports, creative industry, and in some instances, crime. Enhancing accountability and transparency have emerged as 2 critical ways to address both the developmental failures and the democratic shortfalls associated with corruption. And in the last 30 years, there has actually been several projects, programs, and initiatives that have been implemented or funded by various bodies around the world, such as international organizations, government agencies, non-governmental organizations, and the private sector, to enhance transparency and accountability in many countries around the world. Some of these initiatives have included sponsoring conferences such as this, as well as workshops and training programs, capacity building and training initiatives, awareness sensitization campaigns, sanctions against countries, monitoring and evaluation and reporting activities, and more recently, the use of information and communication technologies to combat corruption. Today, ICTs, information and communication technologies, are slowly becoming a key component in the fight against corruption in many countries around the world and are used by these bodies in this specific activity. Research on this area, the use of ICTs to combat corruption, is usually guided by an electronic governance conceptual framework, and this essentially means the use of information and communication technologies to enhance good governance. Research of this nature typically focuses on 4 different areas. 1, the use of ICTs in government to combat corruption, and this particular discourse is called e-government. The use of ICTs by the state to monitor electoral fraud, and this falls under e-democracy related issues. The use of ICTs by the state in the sale or purchase of goods and services from businesses or other government agencies or other governments, and this generally falls under the subheading e-procurement, and the use of ICTs by the state to bypass interactions between agents of the state and citizens, which usually encourage corrupt activities, and this falls under e-services. Not much scholarly research has been undertaken to explore the use of ICTs by citizens to combat corruption, e-society-related issues. E-society-related issues is essentially looking at e-citizens working together towards achieving a particular goal, and for the purposes of this research project, the goal is good governance. What does exist is actually scattered across the globe, captured in blogs, reports, on websites, on YouTube, on Facebook, and this has actually made attempts to learn and disseminate information about the phenomena time-consuming and in some instances challenging. This is problematic for many reasons. One, there's a need for a holistic picture showing the landscape of the use of ICTs by citizens to fight corruption. Two, there's a need for stories or lessons that we can learn about strategies about how to combat corruption. And three, there's a need for best practices on corruption. Two, there's a need for a holistic approach to combating corruption, one that extends the range of options that generally exists, looking specifically at government agencies and non-governmental organizations. And three, there's a need to facilitate citizens' participation in government and governance. Most recently, several research projects have actually highlighted that citizens want to be engaged in this particular activity, but there are not many different avenues or opportunities for them to do so. Thus, the purpose of this research is to fill this intellectual gap that exists, while at the same time creating a repository of knowledge for those interested in this aspect of combating corruption from a practical perspective. This is accomplished using these two research questions. One, how and in what ways can citizens across the world use ICTs to combat corruption? Two, what are the main challenges that citizens have faced in the use of ICTs to combat corruption? Now, one of the things Livingston actually didn't say is that I'm actually a methodologist. I teach research methods, both qualitative and quantitative, and us methodologists tend to be a stickler for the use of methodology no matter what we're doing in any investigation. Now, this particular area of research is new. I spent 4 months trying to see how I can get information from the academic community, and it was very challenging. And for that reason, I've decided that the appropriate methodology to be used here is the documentation analysis. Now, documentation analysis is one of those qualitative methodologies that are usually used in circumstances that not much is known about the phenomena. Specifically, very little, I must add. This specific type of methodology falls under the qualitative exploratory research, whereby we are specifically looking at exploring ideas and focusing on the use of secondary data. Like other analytical methods in qualitative research, document analysis requires that data be examined and interpreted in order to elicit meanings, gain understandings and insights, as well as to develop empirical knowledge about the particular object, subject, process, event, or the phenomena being explored. Now, the sample, and yes, you can use sampling documentation and document analysis. Now, the sample that was used for this particular study was actually 3 books, 16 journal articles, many of them not necessarily related to the use of ICTs by citizens to combat corruption, but generally the use of ICTs generally in combating corruption. 35 websites, 18 Facebook pages, 20 YouTube videos, 23 online news portals, and 48 blog posts. The method of data collection was observation and of the texts and archival records themselves. And analysis generally took the form of the qualitative description, which is a very traditional approach to qualitative research, but it's making a comeback now, and thematic analysis, both of which are used as a form of data reduction to find the findings that are presented here today. Now, as it relates to the limitation of this particular study, it's important to recognize that because the study that we're doing here now, this particular study, not much is known about it. There are no interviews, no survey. The study specifically focuses on secondary data. And of course, there are many disadvantages in using this particular methodology. There's also the recognition that there's a specific delimitation here. I am specifically looking at the use of ICTs as tools to combat corruption by citizens. As discussed earlier, the discussion about the use of ICTs to combat corruption, generally speaking, is vast, but not much research is being done as it relates to looking at citizens. So therefore, I'm focusing here in this study on how citizens can essentially help themselves in the battle, in the corruption battle. Now, our review of the literature does recognize that there are already several tools that are available for citizens to fight corruption, and not necessarily ICT-related tools, and they're presented here. They range from participatory budgeting to the use of social auditing tools. And I think it was on Tuesday I had a 3-hour workshop and I emphasized 3-hour workshop. I'm looking at you, Livingston, and I'm emphasizing the 3-hour. A 3-hour workshop which we discussed these offline tools that can be used by citizens to combat corruption. Only now there is some recognition, and not scholarly, but more so by donor agencies, of the possibility of using ICTs to fight corruption. Now, the research, the literature that has been analyzed essentially found that not much scholarly research exists regarding the use of ICTs to focus on citizens fighting corruption. What does exist indicates that ICTs have actually enabled citizens to participate more directly in the socio-political institutions and environments of their countries. Specifically as it relates to corruption fighting, ICTs have been used as a public education tool in two different ways here. One, as a public education tool to raise awareness about the importance of transparency, accountability, the link between corruption and development, and to share information between and among citizens and CSOs, civil society organizations, about combating corruption. Two, ICTs have been used by citizens to monitor activities of the state, promote political activism and mobilization against corrupt officials and institutions, and also report these acts of corruption. And I'm going to focus on these two here now. Now, based on the literature, it has been observed that as the awareness of corruption increases, so too does the understanding of the negative effects of corruption on a particular society. I myself have been a victim of this. I remember in 2002 going to New Zealand, just a quick story, to do my PhD, and I had befriended a half Maori, half Indian, half Chinese, half Italian, half European. She said there were several mixes, right? And she smoked a lot, and I remember saying to her, you know, there's this particular patch that you can use to mitigate the smoking or help you with your smoking habits. And, you know, she said it was very difficult for her to pay for it. It was too expensive. Now, I was on a scholarship, and part of the scholarship meant that I had access to free healthcare. So, you know, being the kind-hearted person that I was, I decided to go to the pharmacy and request a couple of these patches for her. When I went to her and I said to her in good faith, you know, I got some patches for you. And she said, how did you get them? And I said, you know, I'm on the scholarship, so I can I have access to free healthcare. She said to me, but that's wrong. And she never spoke to me again after that. And for me, it was a good act of gesture and good faith, and there was a recognition of the fact that I had actually done something wrong, and this is me. But there have been circumstances and documented circumstances in Jamaica of sand mining to the point whereby rivers have actually changed course. And this is a study that we had done a couple years ago, and when we had spoken to the citizens in the community about the sand mining operations that they had undertaken and how it had significantly impacted on them in the long run during the hurricane season, they were unaware that what they were doing was wrong. So there is this recognition that, knowledge plays an important role in combating corruption. Now, this is especially the case in some countries where public education about corruption and the impact of corruption is low or non-existent, or in some countries where it is culturally tolerant to participate in or facilitate corrupt activities. And one example, most recently, it has been observed that ICTs have been successfully used to enhance people's information capabilities through digital literacy. ICTs, it is argued, offers a multi-platform, multidimensional opportunity to disseminate information over a vast space and in relatively short periods of time about critical issues related to corruption. This digital literacy can range from making people aware of what is corruption, the links between corruption and development, as well as strategies to combat corruption. And this can be done either through what we call high tech, which is the use of online social network, instant messaging, low tech, mobile phones, TV, radio, or a hybrid of low and high tech, whereby we have civil society organizations that have the technologies and they would engage the citizens about combating corruption. Now, what has worked? There have been several documented cases of the use of ICTs, both high-tech, low-tech, and hybrid tech, to combat corruption. For example, in the western province of Rwanda, there is a specific initiative that was undertaken that has helped in terms of disseminating information about corruption, as well as showing persons how to combat corruptions with mobile phones, and this has worked significantly. In Jamaica, for example, before we reach Jamaica, and there's also this particular website here. I'd like to draw attention to the website. Let me see if I can just get access to the website. Just give me a second. One of my favorite websites. All right, Voices Against Corruption. Right, Voices Against Corruption here, which is a website where you can actually, well, there are a lot of civil society organizations that are now using this website to train persons in actually combating corruption. You can actually go on the website. It provides information about what is corruption, provides information about combating corruption. It provides information about other CSOs that persons can work with and interact with in terms of how to engage and develop strategies to undertake corrupt activities. And I think one of the most popular features of this website is that it has an online collaboration whereby CSOs, even citizens and community-based organizations, CBOs, can actually go to the website and learn how to write grant proposals to get funding to combat corruption. Let's go back to Manitoba. Sorry about that. Okay, and I would like to also draw your attention to this website in Jamaica, which is the National Integrity Action, which has been very instrumental in the use of a kind of low and high tech in combating corruption. They have these ads that are played on the radio, on the TV very often. Trevor, I'm going to play one of your ads right now. I think this is my favorite of them.
Yes, ma'am. I will finance you. I think you're going to win the next election. I just need
Hold on 1 second. No. Okay, hold on 1 second.
to know how I going to benefit.
See the Chris SUV there. I him get all of the government big contract them.
Them have to give him, and him support them big time.
Not no left away. That for stop. Jamaica no for run so.
And the publicly show how much them give and stop the corruption.
For real.
End secret campaign financing now. Build integrity.
A message from the National Integrity Action Forum.
Right, so this is NIA is actually one of the CSOs, NGO that has actually helped in terms of combating corruption. Now, the good thing about NIA is that NIA is establishing chapters and engaging young people across the island to say how and in what ways they can actually fight corruption, which is an excellent strategy. Hold on 1 second, where's my... we in the Department of Government, you can see this, right? I don't need to open back the something there slide. Where is it, man? Come on. Okay, so we in the Department of Government as well, we're actually doing our part in terms of combating corruption. We have established what is called the Good Governance Society, or the Governance Society for short, and these are the students in the department and the facilitator. And what we actually do is that we go into communities to educate persons in the community who would have not been exposed to public education and public awareness about issues of governance, one of which includes corruption. And we also go into the schools, to the high schools, where we engage the students about issues of good governance, one of which includes corruption. And we get support from various organizations. NIA is one of the organizations. The corruption, anti-corruption, transparency, accountability team within the Good Governance Society liaisons a lot with NIA about getting material to engage young persons about corruption. But what we've taken NIA's material as well, and we've also digitized it, and we tend to, when we get the email addresses and the telephone numbers of the students and the Facebook addresses, we would normally send information from NIA as blasts to these people. So we have a database of 380 students thus far, and we just started like 2 months ago. And on a weekly basis, we would send blasts to them about different aspects of corruption, transparency, human rights, and so forth. And it's working quite well. All right. Now, the second activity that is involved in the use of ICTs by citizens to combat corruption is actually monitoring corruptions. Now, ICTs such as mobile phones, especially smartphones, PCs, and apps which drive these technologies can also provide citizens with the ability to observe the activities of elected officials, government agencies, and agents of the state, and collectively take action in the form of public campaigns and monitoring and mobilizations to address corruption-related issues. And one example of this is the website I Paid a Bribe. Now, I Paid a Bribe, let me just switch. Okay, now, I Paid a Bribe is a website, a very fascinating website, that allows you to go online and report that you paid a bribe. It allows you to go online and report that you didn't pay a bribe, you were offered a bribe but did not pay a bribe. And you can also report on persons that you've engaged who you would recognize and report as being an honest individuals. And then they would generate reports at the end of the day in a specific country to measure the level of corruption that exists in the country based on citizens' participation and engagement. Now, I Paid a Bribe was actually started in India, but is now in many countries around the world. We at the Governance Society have actually engaged I Paid a Bribe. I'm just giving an idea of how far they are right now. So this is an idea of the countries that are participating with I Paid a Bribe. It's an excellent, excellent tool to monitor and track corruption in a country, and an excellent tool to put pressure on government officials. And there's actually been statistical studies to show that where these tools exist, people are very fearful of engaging in corrupt activities themselves. Okay. All right. Oh, and I Paid a Bribe also provides you with trends by department, trends by the municipality in the particular country to see which municipality is more corrupt or which agency is more corrupt than the other. And this is automatically generated based on the input of citizens. Another phenomenon which has seen the use of ICTs to combat corruption is one that is called citizen journalism. Now, citizen journalism involves ordinary citizens playing an active role in the process of collecting, reporting, analyzing, and disseminating news and information. Now, citizen journalism websites exist all over the world, ranging from countries from Armenia to actually the Ukraine, and in some instances, and this is what is fascinating about citizen journalism website, there is actually global collaboration between and among citizen journalists around the world. Now, citizen journalists rely on ICTs such as new media technologies, social networking sites such as Facebook and Twitter, and media sharing websites such as Instagram and YouTube to share information about different activities. They are popularly used as a tool to combat corruption, and there are several examples that I can show here. One I won't show, which is the one we all know, which is what I have to mention it, which is WikiLeaks. But one is CNN iReport, and the other one is the Citizen Journalist website. Now, the Citizen Journalist website is perhaps one of the most interesting of all of these websites, because it is where all the citizen journalists actually collaborate to share information and share ideas. And these are all citizens' mark here, about combating corruption. As a matter of fact, there is even can I bring up this? This is why I had to have this thing here, because on the website itself, you can actually post pictures and videos of corruption, of corrupt activities. So, for example, if a policeman were to stop you and offer you a bribe, or say that you had to pay a bribe to get off if you were speeding, you can actually record the activity using your mobile or your iPad or whatever technological gadget you have to record the video or take the picture. And this citizen journalist website allows you to upload the video. Now here's a video, I'm just going to run a part of the video that shows the
cars being parked in a no parking area. It's not unusual to see rules being broken or bent, but there are very few people who will speak out, like our next citizen journalist, Gaurav Bakshi. He turned citizen journalist when he was asked to pay a bribe at a Noida registrar office. When he refused, he was physically assaulted and threatened. Gaurav filed an FIR to bring the culprits to book. But in an ironic twist, the same officials are now willing to pay him a bribe of 1,50,000 rupees in the name of compensation to settle this case. An angry Gaurav Bakshi has picked up the mic once again to expose the brazenness of these government officials.
My name is Gaurav Bakshi. I had become a citizen journalist to expose corruption in Noida Sector 33 Registrar's office. This was after I was asked to pay a bribe to register my stepdaughter Azara's adoption deed. I have become a citizen journalist yet again to expose how bribery and corruption is deep-rooted in our system. My first citizen journalist report made some impact. A clerk was suspended for asking me for a bribe, but no action has still been taken against the others. Not the one to give up, I have been following up on my FIR regularly. In February of this year, I was approached by the Noida RWS president, Mr. NP Singh, and AIG Stamps SN Rai, asking me to reach some form of settlement in the case and to withdraw my FIR. From my end, I asked them for a written apology and assurance that such incidences would not take place again in future in this office, as well as some form of compensation for the damaged personal items, including the digital camera, as well as the assault on us that had taken place. A month later, in March, I was called for another meeting at Mr. Singh's residence, where AIG SN Rai, along with two of my witnesses, were also present. At the meeting, I was offered a compensation of 1,50,000 rupees, but in the form of cash.
And sorry, this is being done with a hidden camera to catch the information.
It became clear that I was being offered a bribe of 1,50,000 rupees in the name of compensation to take media attention of this case. Ironically, this was for the very case where I had previously refused to pay a bribe.
We expected them to give it in a way, honorable way, as in a check or reminder, but they refused to do that, and we will not accept cash because this is what we are fighting against.
I immediately decided to bring this entire matter to the notice of the district magistrate and ask for an investigation into this illegal offer of cash. I also included 2 witness letters to back my claims, but it's been more than a month and still no action has been taken.
All right, so this is just one example of many examples that exist and many stories that exist. And this is not CNN, this is not BBC. These are citizens using specific technologies, what they have, a webcam, a mobile phone, an iPad, a slate computer, a desktop computer to capture information and to share information via websites and to put pressure on government agencies. Now, there are some, this is not a utopia, this is not a panacea for combating corruption, because there are many different challenges that exist. One is the digital divide. You know, who can report corruption? In most instances, what actually happens is that those persons who are affected by corruption, the poor, the most vulnerable, may or may not have the technologies to actually help the fight against corruption itself. In some instances, they may not have the knowledge to use the technologies to combat corruption. And in several other instances, what may happen is that there are many community groups, civil society organizations that may or may not be technologically savvy and therefore may not be able to activate some issues. Then, of course, we have some privacy concerns, some ethical concerns. What are the boundaries? You know, taking a mobile phone, intentionally taking a mobile phone to have a meeting with a possible corrupt official, you know, is it an ethical thing to do? So there are many ethical concerns surrounding the use of these technologies that have to be recognized before going any further. In the Caribbean, some of these tools can actually be used. Some are actually being used. As it relates to access and use of technology, the technologies are becoming cheaper and cheaper, smaller and smaller, and more accessible. They are more accessible. They are becoming a way of life for many young persons. As many of us would recognize and know that, you know, what we call thumbing or using the phone to send instant messages, it has now become an extension of the self and a norm. And it's important to harness and direct the attention away from the use of these paraphernalia, these technological paraphernalia, away from social activity to more serious work, and combating corruption is one. Now, as it relates to the future, I'm someone who is, as it relates to technology, all my friends know that I have everything and anticipate when everything is coming out. There are many different innovations that are emerging on a daily basis. We have watches that have phones on them and can record messages. We have wearable technology shirts, T-shirts, and jackets and vests that actually have the technology. We have the Google Glass, which is an interesting piece of tool. I can't wait to get my hand on it as soon as it's released. It's glasses that you can actually use to video and stream information while you're on the internet while you are wearing it. We have mobile phones that can record conversations while you're on the phone, as well as record conversations while you're not on the phone. And we have the most innovative one yet, which is a contact lens, which allows you to capture images that is currently being created. So there are a lot of opportunities and tools and techniques that citizens can actually use in the fight against corruption. One has to recognize that there are several ethical concerns, security concerns, privacy concerns that also need to be addressed for this specific activity to become very popularized. Citizens are not waiting for them to be addressed. They're actually engaging and utilizing these tools in their fight against corruption. And I'm hopeful that a lot of the CSOs that are here, the NGOs that are here, will use this presentation as an opportunity to do some research into how they can expand and extend the range of options that they are using in their fight against corruption, what they can use and what is more morally usable for them. Thank you very much for having me. Oh, and sorry, I forget this last one. And this is the use of, skin grafting technology to actually, so this is it's technology embedded under the epidermis of your skin and linked to a microchip in your head that is connected to your visual cortex that can allow you to actually take the pictures using, currently in production, I must say, currently in production. So as I said, the future is quite interesting in terms of tools that can be used to fight corruption. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Waller, for that very enlightening presentation. We're going to take about 3 questions as we prepare for the other. The mic is right here if you want to ask a question. Right. Dr. Donna Hope, are you here? Dr. Hope? No. Because I want.
Thank you very much. Anand Gulsran from Guyana. I just want to make a little comment on the website, I Paid a Bribe. We do have a website, but it is under the Ministry of Home Affairs. And it's really a situation where it is meant to report bribes taken by policemen. To date, the government is unable to say how effective it is. And one suspects that people in Guyana, citizens in Guyana, do not trust the system. And therefore, it would not be surprising that there are no reports. We also have a situation where we have a Commissioner of Information under the Access of Information Act. He has been in place for the past 8 months, and there have been no requests for access to information. So the point I'm making is that if it is a government-controlled kind of arrangement, people do not trust the system, and as a result, you find that, especially in the case of the I Paid a Bribe, there are virtually no reports about bribe taking, and there are no reports of people requesting access to information. Perhaps you might want to.
Okay, so the literature does say that once the technology or the point of reporting the corrupt activity, once it is controlled by the government, then people will be fearful of it, because what it represents is an extension of the tools used by the government. It was not actually established as a tool to do that, and I'm a bit surprised, or perhaps not necessarily surprised, intrigued by the approach to capture the tool to capture corruption. Anyway, but that's a different conversation. That's an interesting story. I'd like to talk to you about it some more. But suffice it enough to say that in most instances, when these tools are used by the government as a tool to monitor corruption, citizens are usually fearful of it. Over there.
Hi, good morning. To ask a question as it pertains to our local context here in Cayman, we were BlackBerry capital of the world for the longest period of time. We're now moving to iPhones. We have access, young people, everyone tends to have access to all of the information technology examples that you gave as far as social media, the actual tools themselves. And what we've found is that people do talk and do report amongst themselves. There is still the fear of repercussion once you actually take it out into the public forum. Mm-hmm. The way that people have taken it out to the public forum is to do it anonymously. But then there's a question of legitimacy that ends up being put on the information that gets out there. So for instance, Cayman News Service you're able to comment on certain things, but once it's done anonymously, whoever's on the other end, whether it's the government or anybody else, tend to say that that is not, in fact, accurate or representative of some of the issues and the things that are coming through. So how do you actually build that aspect of legitimacy on anonymous kind of information and anonymous reporting when you have a citizenry that is afraid of being identified because of the fact that we're so small and there are repercussions? And yes, might be some levels of bribery that happen on the street, but usually when we're talking about corruption, we're talking about things like, who got the government contract, who got the scholarship, so things that are a little bit more covert than the things that you might be able to capture. So how do you get that legitimacy aspect into those anonymous reports or the anonymous expressions of what is going on in the society?
Right, so as it relates to legitimacy, what works best in the literature are the hybrid models. So these are the CSOs, the community, the civil society organizations, and the CBOs, the community-based organizations, who would have the websites that persons would go and make the report, and then they would investigate the activities. So the organization itself is a legitimate organization. So let's use NIA, for example. So NIA would have a legitimate organization that in Jamaica that monitors corruption. And I would go and say to a member of NIA that I'm having some challenges. I have some information about a corrupt activity. I may show the information or post it to their website, and their website may or may not have systems that can actually protect my identity. NIA would now have to take it on themselves and investigate the matter. So the legitimacy, the literature states that legitimacy comes more so with the hybrid models, although in some instances, however, the high-tech models also work. For those websites that facilitate the masking of IP address or facilitate me uploading the information and hiding my identity. But it is an issue that is in the literature, a concern for many persons who would not participate in this activity because of this fear of being able to be tracked online as it relates to sharing the information. But the workaround is to do it through a legitimate CSO itself. One over here, and okay. Right. Security in the sense, in terms of security of harm to self? Right. 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 You mean uploading? Well, many of the sites, in the paper itself, many of the sites, especially ipaidthebribe.com, actually have secure servers that facilitate this. And there's actually not been any incidents that I have seen based on what I have read about a breach of security. I think when the site started, if memory serves me correctly, it wasn't a substantive activity, but more and more when persons came on the site, and if you check the blogs, or if people actually ask, is this a secure place to transfer information? Will my IP address be captured? Will my internet service provider be captured? I think they have corrected a lot of those issues. This version that they have right now, which is widely used in many countries, is one of the securest as one can say. But being in IT myself, nothing is ever secure. And that's also a recognition. But I'm pretty much sure that, and I can't speak for them, I'm just saying this based on the fact that if I were in that particular position, that all attempts would be made to ensure security or the perception of security for the purpose of longevity and the sustainability of the product itself. I mean, just as how the iPhone and Android project itself as being secure, and we all know that that's not the case. But there's this comfort level in the representation of the discourse of security. Okay. All right.
One more.
A round of applause for Dr. Waller, please, for an excellent presentation. One quick question. You have to go very fast, though, quickly.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Wilfred Mayer, and I want to have next question for Dr. Waller. I think that use of ICT technology is not enough in the Caribbean. And that's why people don't have trust, they don't believe in it. So you point out that we have to use technology in combating corruption. But criminals and those who practice criminality, they use the same technology for their crimes. So I think that the use of technology is the ICT, for instance, is something that we have to let our youngsters know what is the difference between right use of technology and the fake. So what can you say about that? And I know that in the Caribbean, for instance, within the CARICOM, there is a project on ICT awareness. The CANTO, Caribbean Association of National Telecoms Organizations, they support the use of ICT products in schools.
Okay, sir.
Well.
Thank you very much. Here we got the question. We're going to ask, want to comment on that? Okay, he's going to talk to you after by yourself, all right?
Okay, thank you.
Well, thanks very much.
Yes.
Excellent. Could I have a round of applause again for Dr. Waller? I will now transition to Dr. Gardner. Before I do so, we ask you to fill out the evaluation forms for this session. Thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Come on now, come on. Good morning. Wake up. A few announcements before our immediate presentation. After each presentation, the speeches will be placed on the website under the title Press. And so you can access the presentations on the website under the title Press. To my right and through that door are the bathrooms for those who need to make access of it. And I know most people will have already known that, but for those who are coming in today for the first time, to my right, under that banner, is a door to access bathrooms. We have been affirmed and introduced, and everybody has been identified as special since we began this conference. So there's no need for further recognitions or affirmations this morning. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Andrew Holness. Yeah, you can come. He has been on the platform a few times before, so you all know him by now, so I won't get into any undue detail in the introduction. Nonetheless, I'll say a few things about him. Youthful, as you can see, the 9th Prime Minister of Jamaica. He has projected a view for inclusivity in governance. Served in various civic organizations and elected to representational politics, son of civil servants, an academic in his own rights, frequently has utterances as well as his inclination toward intellectually stimulating activities. You must find an opportunity to engage this man in a conversation. He has a commitment to what leaders should do, and he's unabashed about speaking his mind on those issues. Having taught for a short while himself, he's not a stranger to the academia. But despite his youthfulness, there's a bit of iron in his bones. And if you have a question about that, he recently was triumphant in a party, election. in Jamaica and stood his ground and came through a strong and heated battle successfully. Very strong and committed person, married with 2 young children. Most of all, in my own interaction with him, I get a sense that he's committed to transformation. And in listening to him informally speak about some of the issues we have been dealing with, I am convinced we are in for an engaging presentation. Topic: change in the ethical and anti-corruption framework. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Andrew Holness. Let's give him a hand.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gardner. It is said that don't worry about that. It is said, I was just about to assure you, because it is said that a good speech is long enough, like a skirt, to cover the subject matter, but short enough to keep your attention. So I will be between those 2 extremes. I want to express my appreciation and honor at being given the opportunity to be keynote speaker at this very important anti-corruption conference staged at the University College of the Cayman Islands. And I want to extend my gratitude to the president of the UCCI, Mr. Roy Bodden, and Dr. Livingston Smith, the conference chair, and other key organizers of the conference, including some of Jamaica's local universities, and I must especially recognize the National Integrity Action, who collaborated in making this event possible. This is not my first time in the Cayman Islands. I was here maybe 10 years ago, and I would want to say that the Cayman Islands has progressed significantly since I've been here last, and it is a country that should take great pride in itself for what it has achieved. I certainly am impressed. But this is my first time here as leader of the opposition in Jamaica. Unfortunately, I was not Prime Minister long enough to pay you a visit, but I promise you that next time when I visit Cayman, I will be the Prime Minister. It is clear from the attendance at this conference by the representatives from various sectors, politics, the church, civil society, and academia, that corruption is of great concern to all, and it impacts various sectors of the society. It also highlights that in tackling this problem, a collaborative and cooperative approach needs to be taken. It is a fight for all of us, as we are all impacted by corruption, whether directly or indirectly. We all must rigorously, vigorously pursue the fight against corruption. There is no room for complacency or ambivalence. The theme of the conference, Towards a Corruption-Free Caribbean: Institutions, Ethics, Values, Trust, and Morality, clearly conveys the importance that is being attached to the fight against corruption within the Caribbean region. Some of our Caribbean countries have recorded, and I guess we must all agree, disappointing scores on the Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index for 2013. My own country, Jamaica, has a ranking of 83 out of 177 countries last year. And this is a ranking that we had the year before. It is a low score that we had, 38 out of 100, 100 being the least corrupt. I am personally disappointed that we have not recorded significant improvements in our corruption perception index. We are not the only ones. Trinidad and Tobago faces a similar profile. Suriname faces a similar profile. Guyana faces a similar profile. Haiti faces a similar profile. But I don't want this to color our impression that the Caribbean is a corrupt place. We do have countries in the Caribbean that are doing fairly well. Barbados registered a very impressive 15th rank in the index, and we should be proud of that. They lead the way for this region. The Bahamas, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dominica also show results that are worthy of note. So overall, the perception of the Caribbean is mixed. We are not all doing badly, and some are doing very well. But we can see that there are serious challenges in our territories. But let's focus on the good news. I think the good news is that right across the Caribbean, governments and our civil societies are taking up the anti-corruption agenda, that they are organizing, that they are putting in place legislation, and that they are moving generally towards establishing a framework to tackle corruption. In addressing corruption, we need to apply a broad definition and a more practical definition for the boundaries of corruption. In any human organization, leadership is inevitable. By definition, leadership makes decisions on behalf of the group that affects the welfare of the entire group. Leadership ultimately exercises discretion over the welfare of the group. The evolution of modern social organizations revolves around the creation of systems to control the use of discretion. We see this in the development of laws, constitutions, oversight of parliament, the spread of democratic principles, and the increasing mobilization and empowerment of the citizen through greater access to information, which leads to greater demand for accountability of their leaders and the use of their discretion, authority, and power. As our system to control leadership, decision-making, and power becomes more complex, in other words, we develop bureaucracies, the threat of misuse of discretion by leaders that affect the group or public welfare is now compounded by the threat of misuse of the bureaucracy or the public office that affects public welfare. From this perspective, corruption is not only an ailment that affects politicians or holders of elected office. Anyone who exercises a power of discretion or exercises the authority of an office, public or private, that impacts public welfare or public good and uses this discretion, this authority, in such a way as to secure personal benefits, deprive someone or a group of their rights, pervert systems of access, signaling, and distribution, or generally affect the public good or diminish public welfare, commits an act of corruption. This is a highly generalized definition, I will admit. But let us examine it in practical terms to see if it makes sense. Conceivably, not all corrupt acts are illegal. It should therefore follow that though an act may not be legal, or rather, though an act may be legal, it doesn't mean that it is not corrupt. All it means is that society has not yet decided to regulate the act. For example, the music industry in Jamaica is negatively affected by the practice pay for play. We call it payola. That's the term adopted to describe the practice. And this is an act where an office holder, in this case the DJ, accepts pay outside of his contracted remuneration from his employer, a bribe, to give access outside of the accepted and expected process of accessing the airwaves to someone to have their songs given heavier rotation. This, of course, deprives the musician who follows the right process, who has a right to expect that the right process would be used to select the song. It deprives him of the possible benefit that he could get from having his song played. But more than that, there is a deeper concern. And the deeper concern is that the songs that are often being heavily rotated have social messages that challenges the established value systems which affect the public good and possibly diminish public welfare. So here is an action. It's not illegal yet in Jamaica. It was made illegal in the United States. It's probably illegal in other countries. It's a corrupt act. It's not carried out by an elected office holder or a publicly appointed office holder. But it has such an impact on the public welfare, on the public good. It perverts systems of access. It perverts signaling mechanisms. It perverts distribution mechanisms. It's corrupt. And there are other such actions. For example, insider trading, price fixing, that affect how economic systems operate. That potentially could create financial crises. These are corrupt acts which must be regulated, must be dealt with. And so I wanted the conference to broaden its scope when it thinks of corruption. And I'm deliberately doing this not to let off politicians. I'm deliberately doing this because I want to give a deeper understanding to connected persons. All those are now rolled up into a public relations campaign, which, by the way, has been very effective. I must acknowledge the former Contractor General, Mr. Greg Christie, who, by his work, has single-handedly elevated the importance of the anti-corruption framework in Jamaica. The present Contractor General is here, Mr. Dirk Harrison, and I know that he's filling your shoes, Greg, and he's doing a wonderful job. I don't usually make these kinds of compliments because it's not politic to do so. But you have to admit when public officials are doing their jobs. So there is no question that the anti-corruption framework in Jamaica is highly publicized, elevated, that there is civil society action, that there is public education, that there is a thrust towards new legislation. And at this point, let me say that the government last Friday introduced in the Senate a new anti-corruption bill, and that bill seeks to create a single anti-corruption institution. I want you to reflect on what I said earlier. So, in the march of time, governments, people, societies have responded by creating bureaucracies to curb the use of discretion which could have a negative impact on public welfare and the public good. Over time, the development of the bureaucracy has been disparate and sometimes uncoordinated. So some countries have several regulatory bodies and agencies all trying to control corruption. So the new phase of anti-corruption framework development, in my mind, reading the literature, seems to be trying to bring order to the existing bureaucracies that deal with anti-corruption. So surprisingly, there is a movement towards creating single anti-corruption institutions with one overarching legislation, and giving that single anti-corruption agency prosecutorial and investigative powers. That's a good thing, but I'm certain you would smile with me that we are now back at where we started, where we are now looking at placing the discretion of managing anti-corruption in the hands of a czar. It's something that we have to reflect on. Now, clearly, not a czar in the historical sense, but nonetheless, one person with discretion. I make the point to make a deeper point that the fight against corruption really depends on the integrity of leadership. Because whoever occupies the office of the czar must be someone of integrity. So I just want it to be clearly understood that yes, we are moving in the right direction, but we have to look very carefully and don't lose sight of the important thing, that governments or whatever the mechanisms that may be put in place to select the anti-corruption czar must ensure that that person is of the highest integrity. And I would also want to say of the highest rationale and judgment. We look at countries that have followed the model and they have worked, which is why I support it. Sierra Leone, Commissioner is here. I had a long talk with him and I'm very impressed with the work that you have been doing in your country. Singapore, Netherlands, you could name it. Many countries have gone that route because it makes sense. If you're going to tackle corruption, you have to coordinate all the agencies and coordinate the legislation. But you asked me today to speak about my vision for the anti-corruption framework of Jamaica. What would I want to see? So yes, I support the evolution of the anti-corruption framework. I believe there are some things that we may need to do to improve that. And what I'm about to say, I've said to Professor Monroe, that I think that in an environment of low trust, which currently exists in Jamaica, you have to be careful that in the public relations campaign, you don't destroy all the trust. Because what you could very well end up doing is making the structures look so bad that people don't have interest anymore. They don't participate. So the public relations campaign about improving the anti-corruption framework must be how to get the citizens to engage more. And so the public relations campaign has to be a little bit more discerning than it is now. The legislative process needs to move much faster than it is moving. And government needs to stop being so ambivalent about the anti-corruption framework. And we have seen that in our present government. When they were the opposition, they joined the they joined the Contractor General, former Contractor General, in demanding accountability of the government through the competitive tender process. But when they became the government, they rejected the competitive tender process and did even more than that. They took their own anti-corruption agency to court for the court to establish that they don't have the power to investigate the pre-contract stages of contracts, a power which the very parliament gave. So we need to stop being ambivalent. The society needs to stop being ambivalent, because there is a view secretly held by many that we must allow the thing, make runnings go on. And I'm sure every Caymanian understand what I'm saying. There is a view to free up the thing, make people can survive. So those kinds of ambivalence in dealing with corruption, we need to sort those out. And of course, the important sorting out agent is the leadership. So what would I like to see happen for our anti-corruption framework? Well, I return to what I started with: bureaucracy. Jamaica is 51 years old, 52 years old, August this year. We have 300 years of colonial government, 500 years of colonialization, many institutions in place. So we are not short of the bureaucratic attempt to control the use of discretion, power, and authority. So the corruption challenge is not just what your leaders do in the use of their discretion, but it is also what the bureaucracies do in the use of their authority. I have not studied this, but I throw it out as a challenge. I'm in a university, that it would be good to study to see which is the larger extent of corruption. Is it the corruption of leaders, or is it the corruption that takes place in bureaucracy, as separate and distinct from the leaders they are put to curb. I would say that much of the corruption takes place within bureaucracies. It happens for many reasons. Let's look at them. So we always tick the first box, that men will sin. They will do things that are immoral, things that are wrong. So yes, human nature, and that goes across the board. But corruption will also happen because sometimes bureaucracies have lost their relevance. They have lost their mandate. And so they exist to satisfy themselves. If you look at Jamaica and you were to write down all the organizations, all the institutions that make up Jamaica, that would become the bureaucracy. And then you could ask yourself the question, how many of these institutions still continue to be relevant to the development of Jamaica today? I'm certain that you would apply that to your own country, and you could start to reflect, do we really need this organization? Do we really need that commission? Do we really need that ministry? Is that department really relevant? And so what we have are organizations that can be easily captured because they do not have a mandate. And from time to time in Jamaica, we see agencies that fall to corruption because the leadership, the basis on which it was established, they have lost their mandate or they don't have a mandate. And so it's easy for the organization to be captured for self. And so what I would want to do for Jamaica is to do an institutional review. If we are going to chart and build a new Jamaica, we can't do it with old institutions. The government has to look at every institution, every ministry, every agency, every organization and say, what is your role and what will you contribute to national development? And give them a mandate. Without that, then people are only trying to keep their jobs. And there are too many institutions who are only serving themselves. So that's one reason, the self-serving nature of bureaucracies. Whenever they lose their mandate, they become self-serving. The other reasons, and I'm going to focus on one in particular, which I must do for Jamaica, is that there are many organizations that exist for important reasons. For example, to guard government revenue. And I'm now here thinking of customs. I'm thinking of the Inland Revenue Department, where by virtue of the business process engaged, it gives the opportunity for corruption. So interestingly, an important tool in fighting corruption is actually improving the business processes of bureaucracies. As it turns out, the flip side of inefficiency is corruption. Whenever you see an inefficient organization, rest assured, there is corruption happening somewhere. And so the Jamaican government must seek to improve the efficiency of all its institutions. It mustn't leave any fat. And if new technologies exist that can deliver the service faster, make sure that that technology is employed. I want to just make what I'm saying very practical so that people can relate to it. We wonder why it is that it takes so long for approvals for simple things to be given in Jamaica. And other countries may have the same experience. Well, one of the first things is that the approvals agencies don't have a mandate for national development. They are not part of the mandate for economic growth. They probably don't understand what their contribution could be to economic growth. But more than that, they use processes that are outdated. Let's take, for example, the process of licensing and certifying the roadworthiness of motor vehicles. If you speak to a Jamaican, they will complain how long it takes and how difficult it is. And how they have to pay for a service that they have already paid for. Well, the government could very well employ better processes. It could look at this institution and say, is it necessary for this institution to still be under the auspices of the government? I mean, is this really the role of government if we are going to rethink an efficient bureaucracy? No, that service could very well be contracted out and operated under commercial terms, which would be more efficient. That's part of the process of improving the bureaucracy which cuts out corruption, which affects the public good. I hope I use that example to concretize the generalized principle. And I would like to see these things happen in Jamaica. But it comes down to one important thing. What does the citizen want? Especially if we speak in the democratic and free context of Jamaica. What does the citizen want? Does the citizen want the situation to remain as it is so that they can eat a food, keep their job, without recognizing that they could have a bigger plate and a better job if the systems were changed? And how do we as politicians engage people who feel that they are victimized on the fringe of society and that the only way that they will ever get anything from society is by engaging in acts that are considered corrupt and illegal? How do we bring them in to the understanding that efficiency can also be equitable? It starts with, I believe, public education. Not the kind that the NIA is doing, though that is important. But it starts with the reintroduction of a solid course of civics. Not one that skirts around the issues in our society, but one that deals with them frontally. For example, when will we regulate extra lessons in our schools? Is that fair? Doesn't that affect the public good? But would that ever appear in a civics book? So, lots of work to be done. I believe I'm up to the task, and I'm very happy to have been given the chance to express these ideas. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you ever so much. Now the speech has been given, so we're not anticipating a speech from anybody. We're allowing a few questions and not a speech. I will stop you if you attempt to give a speech. Few questions because of time. And I see a hand here and one in the back. The mic can go in, move around quickly. And there's a hand in the back next.
Hi, good morning. My name is Rachel, and my question is very simple. What do you believe would be appropriate steps to take for internal party discipline in addressing corruption? Because elections and government come after, but the issues start at party level before you become a government minister.
Well, there are two things that need to happen. The first thing is that within our kinds of democracies, political parties are not recognized. So constitutionally, they are not required to be regulated. And so the very first thing is that for the society to acknowledge that there is such a thing as a political party and stop treating it as the invisible hand in Parliament, which means that you have to now develop regulations to register political parties. So I would encourage countries to start developing that kind of regulation so that political parties have to come and register, they have to declare, they have to be transparent. Secondly, the political parties have to set standards for themselves. The standard setting process can be challenging, and I'm speaking from first-hand experience, because in a diverse country, diversity will be a part of the political party. But that is an ongoing internal process for which the public can be very helpful, because in truth, it is not just who the political party accepts, it is also who the public elects. And so that plays a great part in determining what will be the integral standing of the political party. But I believe it is necessary for political parties to establish their own standards of integrity, probity, fit and proper. I could not stand there and not say, Professor Monroe would certainly give me a lecture afterwards, that the whole business of campaigning and campaign financing is something that countries should look at in a serious way, because that determines the message that gets out to the public. So I would say these three things: the registration, regulation of political parties, the internal establishment of standards of integrity, and the regulation of campaign financing.
Thank you. Honorable, Sir Holiness, I think there's something in your speech today about the importance of civics. And I think we have you have highlighted something that is extremely serious in Jamaica that a lot of us tend to overlook. And let me explain my experience where that is concerned. So the Department of Government has a set of students that go out into high schools to talk about good governance. And accountability and transparency are just one of the 9 pillars of good governance. And as you said, efficiency, effectiveness, it's all connected. I was a bit amazed at the absence of any form of information to students in high schools about any of these things. And I think unfortunately, the University of the West Indies, for some courses, corrects this problem, but not everybody gets the opportunity to attend university. So the demographics of understanding and knowledge exists in Jamaica.
Question.
Oh, sorry, just a question, another question, there's a statement, whereby this is a problem. And I think I like the position that you've taken, and I think this is something that not necessarily the opposition alone, but the government needs to address urgently to correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a hand over here.
Minister, you're right about the need for institutional review, but there's a certain character to Jamaican politics. Plus, the economy has been in recession for about 40 years. How do you reconcile the need for this review with the social and economic realities?
Well, it is because the institutions have lost their way why there is need for the review. In fact, the two things are not mutually exclusive. The entire process of structural reform, previously called structural adjustment, is just a small part of, well, that would be of a review of your economic structures. I am saying, yes, we need to review the economic structures, but we need to review the social and political, educational, religious, civil society, all the structures that feed into the economy.
Westminster, as practiced in Jamaica, does it get into the way of implementing the kinds of changes that you're talking about?
The way in which we practice Westminster does.
Yes.
Yeah, the way in which we practice Westminster gets in the way of progress.
Okay. There's a hand over here.
Yes. There is a myth that the private sector is more efficient than the public. I'm not sure whether you intended to say that, but that could be one interpretation of what you...
Yes, it is an interpretation of what I've said, but I don't believe it is a myth. But I'm not debating the point. For me, it doesn't really matter who is more efficient. For me, what matters is what is the role of the government versus what is the role of the private sector. So if it is that you have an inefficient private sector, government's role is to get it efficient. So what we don't want to happen is for government to play the role of the private sector, because there is a role for the private sector. In my mind, government's role is to regulate, to step in when markets fail, to create markets where none exist, and to prospect for opportunity. That is the role of government.
Thank you very much. Oh, there's a hand. Okay. And I think we can only take one question after that one.
Okay, Mr. Holness, yeah. I think the discussion we're having now and the one we're about to have is a discussion about the efficacy of institutions in resolving a very enduring problem. And there's an important fact that was tabled earlier that bedevils my thinking that we need to reconcile. On the one hand, we have countries like Trinidad and Tobago, which is my country, and Jamaica, which have fairly developed series of institutions. to deal with corruption and improper behavior in public office. And Jamaica has made this step with this stuff being put in the parliament. Trinidad is about to place a new procurement law into our parliament and so on. And nonetheless, Trinidad and Tobago appear to be joined at the hip in these bad scores with Jamaica over the transparency index. Barbados, and I'm coming to a question for this speaker in the next panel, Barbados, which has a relatively undeveloped integrity and transparency framework in terms of institutions and laws.
Can you raise that, yes?
Has the best score in the Caribbean. They're 15th, okay? Barbados is 15th in the world transparency score, corruption perception. And if we want to be scholarly, and I think we all do here, I'm not throwing words, if we want to be scholarly, we have to delve into that question.
Yeah.
What is the decisive reason? We have to reconcile this question. It's a paradox. So I'm asking you, and let's look at the next panel.
I'm very happy you raised the question because it would further elucidate the point I'm making. That whereas you could say the first phase of the anti-corruption framework was the development of legislation and the creation of various agencies to govern various aspects of corruption, I believe in the second phase, it is understood that the bureaucracy that we created have not all worked. They have not all been effective. And that the emphasis must always be on ensuring that the people who hold the offices and exercise the discretion are persons of the highest level of integrity, of judgment, and justice, because that is what ultimately will drive the perception. The perception of a high level of anti-corruption strength in the system is not going to be driven by the numbers of institutions or the numbers of legislation. It is going to be driven by the effectiveness of the leadership of the organization.
And the very last question, person has the mic.
Hello. Oftentimes when I hear politicians speak, I can't really differentiate the difference between development and economic growth. The terms seem to be used interchangeably. So my question is, a lot of the terms that we use tend to come from the business world. So what is the biggest danger or biggest issue with running a country like a business? And I say that too because we're from a jurisdiction here in Cayman where we raise a lot of revenue indirectly. So in your opinion, like, what is the biggest issue with running a country with using a lot of business?
Well, there is always a danger of trying to use markets to provide public goods. That's the biggest danger, because there are some public goods that simply should not be provided by the market, justice being one of them, public education possibly being another. So I think that, to me, that would be the danger. And yes, there is a distinction between growth and development. Growth refers to the literal physical increase of goods and services in your economy. And development refers to the increasing complexity but efficiency and effectiveness of the organization of the society. That's it. Thanks.
Put our hands together again. Thank you very much, Honorable Prime Minister. We appreciate it. Thanks again.